Chapter 8. History does not happen, it is made. My cherished niggering son, in reflecting some of the things that I wrote to you about, another old thought sprang up to the surface of my mind: nigger history. There are those among us today who advocate that the spirit of a people is refined if they know something of their history. This places our niggers in the most peculiar historical dilemma in the history of all history. Hear me, my son. History is not something that just happens. History is something that is made. Of all the history which you have inherited, none has been a recording of truth. For history depends upon the skill and imagination of those who write it, and upon the sanction of rulers who approve it. History is simply a text of dates and descriptions of events, skillfully compiled and composed to control the thoughts of the unwary. The nigger, my son, is in dire need of writers who dare to tamper with the distortion that we call history. If we could make history, we must forsake caution and reject the inclination to conform, for caution and conformity are two qualities of man which deprive him of his oneness with God. It is a proven fact there is no history for a people who embrace caution and conformity. History is a record of interruptions, dates, events, and names of people who dare discard caution and conformity. If you would conform and agree to become a Negro, then there is no place for your name, nor your existence, in any history except as a token footnote to alabaster history and scripture. But to be a nigger, which you are, is a different thing, for you then ignore and caution and interrupt the process of becoming a Caucasian. This is making history. Remember, Christianity began when a man named Jesus interrupted the process of becoming a Jew by throwing caution to the winds and refusing to conform with the process. And look not back to Africa to find a basis for your existence, for Africa was not lost in conformity. Africa has been lost from the very first day when tribal chief sold one of his many wives to a Caucasian missionary for a rope of glittering beads and the salvation of his soul in Jesus Christ. Your foundations lie not in spiritual ties with Africa, for a nigger is distinctive only in America, but your historical future lies not in becoming a Negro, for this is a process of assuring your disappearance. When we have interrupted this process, then we will become makers of history. Throw caution to the winds and refuse to conform to the concept of Negro behavior. Thus you might leave some heritage in history, that your children might one day become rulers of nations. Remember, the truth and proof of any history is based upon the people who dared and created it. There is no history for any race of a people who conform to become some other kind of people. I am sending you now, along with this letter, an origin, how the history of niggers began. I will not contribute to our progress into oblivion. These you will receive sufficiently from textbooks and teachers and our modern factories for imbeciles, which we know as public schools and colleges. What I have what I have written is rather to give you a basis for understanding that niggers are and how they became to be what they are and why they conform to the nigger of making themselves over to became Negroes. They have divided themselves into non-existent classes, my son, patterned after the decadence of a Judeo-Christian social structure to which they pay homage and worship, but like unto apes and monkeys, they perform an ego ignoring the facts of their human existence. There can be no class of man nor beast based on the mimicry and emulation of conduct of some other species and creations so distinctively different from themselves. Remember, there is no such thing as a social class structure among American niggers, my son. Still, there are those amongst us who would become Negroes would have you believe there is. From our very unique inception, niggers have divided themselves into groups which they would prefer identify as classes. I will now submit you to a history of their origin, that you might better identify and distinguish these groups and understand how they actually came into being. Group 1. Niggers. These are the unnatural, pale-skinned aspect of our people, octoroons, quadroons, mulattoes, etc., the most physically pronounced bastards among us because of their light skins. Caucasian features and their hair textures made so at first through the forceful submission of our women to rape and sexual gratification of Judeo-Christian masculine lust, but later they were produced through the willing submission of our black women through their own worship and adoration of the Caucasian and their acceptance of white superiority over the color black. Many of this group might be discernible as niggers to the naked eye, but others just as likely not, for in their fear and hating themselves, such niggerators have crossed over the line and lost themselves in the limbo of passing for white. Group 2 niggers. These are niggers who, due to the happenstance of birth, are denied the physical distinction of Group 1 because of their obviously Negro externals such as skin color and hair texture, so they compensate for it internally. It is mostly these who create and caste and class system among their people, based upon a nigger's willingness and ability to form and emulate the Christian Caucasian in spirit, speech, conduct, and philosophy, no matter how unnatural, immoral, or distasteful. Their physical colors may vary through a spectrum ranging from blue, black, brown, beige, yellow, and near white. When they were not discernible by colors of their pigment, you would distinguish them easily through patterns of proper talk, speech, philosophy, and quite often professions. They would usually show embarrassment or uneasiness in presence of a nigger, brother not of their own educational and cultural background. The embarrassment will become more pronounced if there is an influential Caucasian along in the company. Their professions will range from professional doctors, teachers, preachers, public speakers, writers, and white-collar workers. Generally, they will announce that they are themselves middle-class Negroes. They are the amateur and professional racial prostitutes of black spirits, mind, and flesh, who would sacrifice all to hasten the time when there will be niggers no more. Group 3 niggers. These are the bulk of our nigger people, the unfortunates amongst us. All nigger humanity in its most natural form, generally called common bred and low class by the two aforementioned groups of their people. These are the Negro racial outcasts, the rejected, and the rejectors, due quite often to their unwillingness to conform with the customs of Caucasian Christianity in conduct, manner, and aspiration. Whereas this group is often a product of improper schooling and formal training, from among them come those black people who possess the highest degree of copeability, the only quality that will assure the survival of our Negro species. Copeability, my son, is simply an instinctive and natural facility for discerning honesty from dishonesty and hypocrisy hypocrisy from truth. Excuse me. Now bear with me, my son, as we journey back to the time and place where I will show you how the origin and history of our American niggers began. Group 1. The Creoles. I will begin in this history with a story, for that is what a true history is, based on places and common people, dates in chronological order, along with names of heroes and notable personages only tend to distort a good history and direct it farther away from the actual truth. Although historical texts from which you were taught in school may prove of some interest to you, they are all white, pure, and good. Such histories are but useless to a nigger who is searching to learn something of himself. Such texts are also detrimental to the hapless Caucasian student, for when the experiences and participation of the black man are deliberately deleted and never recounted, then the actual truth of being a white man is filled with folly. The reality of whiteness will ever depend on the degrees readily measured in pure blackness. Though our national textbook historians will acknowledge the importation of African slaves to America as a contributing factor to the survival and development of this nation, They have never accounted for the development and growth of the nigger, nor the process and means by which our niggers came to be recognized and titled as Negroes. Actually, it all came about through will and design, my son. So it is through will and design that I must here take the divinely bestowed liberty to write us into account. For by teaching you to forsake your niggerness and niggerism, he, the Caucasian, thus teaches you to forsake your birthrights, by teaching you to accept the title Negro, which has invented by him solely for his own convenience, and then you will have not only forsaken but relinquish claim to all human rights except those which he elects to grant you. For you must be remade in order to fulfill the requirements and to qualify for the existence as a Negro, an existence which he created solely for our nigger race of people, whose emancipation has been taken into consideration for nigh some 500 years. As I have related in my Genesis, in the beginning we were all here in a paradise together, black, white, red, and yellow, aspects of mankind, before God drove us from the garden until time came that he would summon us home, so this new world was discovered. Man in search of food in his beginnings, by varied and sometimes indirect means, is now returning to our original home place. Perhaps those children of the East, Africa, and the Near East will return to lay their claims to this original paradise through means of war, but you must know, my nigger son, that all eyes are upon this continent, where there was a beginning before the Jew or the Christian were given the word. But here my concern is the nigger, who has accepted denial of himself not only in spirit, but in name. He might attain the illusory paradise of the Judeo-Christian. It was their search for God, who has always been synonymous with wealth and gold and silver to the Jew, Gentile, and Christian, that sent the Christian crusades on their way to free the Holy Land. It was still this search which inspired the decadent queen of financially bankrupt nations to finance an expedition of desperation headed by an unemployed sea captain after he had sat and listened to the stories told to him by a well-journeyed nigger black sailor, so as history tells us Christopher Columbus discovered a new world. He did not know, my son, that he had made only rediscover an old one, the original garden, for God had begun calling his children home, from which he had once long ago driven them in confusion. Columbus himself, in his ship logs, which are hardly ever included in their historical textbooks, revealed that he had sighted black Africans on his continent as he sailed in to make his discovery. So thereafter the Caucasian Christian came, bringing the word to heathens as they plundered the land of its wealth, while laying claim to it in the names of Christianity in their countries, Spain, France, England, Portugal, Germany, and the Netherlands. But they were unable to survive as white men alone. So our niggers were brought forth, though in chains and shackles they returned, for God had also called them home. Now the origin of the distinctive group 1 Creole nigger species had their beginnings in the French colonies sometime shortly after 1682, when La Salle had claimed a vast territory of the New World and named it for the church and his king Louis the 14th of France. It was a peculiar circumstance and situation that brought this Creole species or Group 1 aspect of niggers into existence and being. Unlike the British Empire, France did not empty her women's prison of convicted prostitutes and ship them abroad to American settlements so that the sexual needs of their colonists might be taken care of. So there was naturally the conspicuous absence of females among the Frenchmen who came to settle this land in the name of their country. But to solve this problem, King Louis XIV commissioned Anthony Crozat, a French slave trader, to bring annually one shipload of African slaves from French Guiana to this American colony. Among these, about one half would generally be women. They were evident at the founding of New Orleans in 1718. Thus, with the arrival of these black slave girls in the New World, the Creoles or Group 1 niggers had their beginning. For unlike their English, Dutch, German, and Portuguese counterparts, the Frenchmen were more concerned with exploration and settlement of America than with profits resulting from slave breeding. There was a peculiar custom among French American settlers which brought forth and gave rise to the Creole or the Group 1 aspect of niggers. Generally, whenever a French slave girl came enceinte, pregnant, for her white master, he would graciously set her free, so that their offspring would not be born into slavery. Naturally, this created a Creole society of mixed breeds, octoroons, quadroons, and mulattoes, commonly referred to as gens du couleur or free jacks. We can easily understand how the inherent eagerness of Negro women to seek copulation with Caucasian males came about as a result of this custom. After more than 3 centuries, there is still a feeling among many of our women that to surrender themselves to the lust of white men in order to bring forth light-skinned bastards will affect a certain kind of privileged freedom. But the sons of God went even farther in the style of Christian concubinage, for it also had traditional for these Frenchmen to be maintained and assume responsibility for support and upkeep of their Creole or Free Jack women. They would settle them in tiny apartments and residences along the ramparts on Rampart Street. There they willingly remained available to the elusive visitations of their former masters, instilled with the feeling that they actually had been set free. The most fortunate among the Free Jacks or Creole offspring of this origin were frequently sent back to France to live, while others would be sent north to become educated in American schools such as Harvard, Yale, etc., and encouraged to cross over to enter the limbo of the pass a la blanc, pass for white. In order to escape the stigma of slavery and niggerism, the Creole majority, however, who were afforded such advantage, remained to live out a most distinctive existence before dying in the mother city. For the Creole males of this group, lifetime occupations were designed. They were destined to enter apprenticeships, learning to master the trades of the free jacks, to emerge as blacksmith, bookmaker, bricklayer, plasterer, carpenter, cement finisher, house painter, stone forger, stevedore, or seller, or the like. The fortunate ones might be trained to become a tutor, fencing master, sword maker, gunsmith, tailor, or fashion designer. The fate of the Creole female was marriage to one of the above, but not before her virginity had been placed on the block to white men, especially if she were attractive. It was for the latter purpose that she would be maternally reared and trained to successfully catch the eyes and become the successful concubine of a Christian Frenchman. Mothers taught them clearly, well, Mothers taught them early the worship of white color and blood strains. The mother's fortune was the daughter's future with a white man. The young Creole girls were strictly supervised, trained, and coaxed in the art of vanity, dress, music, and dance, needlework, poise, grace, poetry, sometimes reading, writing, and horseback riding might be included, dependent upon the mother's former background. Such virtues, along with their Catholic chasteness, especially virginity, would be their major selling points, enhanced by their natural physical feminine attributes. Upon reaching the proper age, generally as early as 14 years old, they would be formally introduced and presented at the Bal du Quadrille Bleu. Such affairs, along with the girls, would be closely chaperoned by the mothers and attended exclusively by white men. The admission prices of $5 and $10 assured a general attendance of only the wealthy. Ironically, this practice was smiled upon by the very church of whom these girls were converts, and whose very doctrines emphasized chasteness and abstinence with carnality as prime requirement for salvation. The structure in which the quadrangle balls were frequently held now serves as a convent for Catholic nuns and is located in the very shadows of the celebrated St. Louis Cathedral. Today, alongside the cathedral, there is a concrete walkway by the name of Antoine's Alley, titled so in honor of a priest who became a legend as he maintained from 10 to 13 of these attractive young Creole girls for the sexual convenience of himself and visiting friends. Even ran complaints to the Pope at Rome by other priests to have him removed for such notorious indulgences, and veiled nothing but having an alleyway named in commemoration of his holy name. The quadrangle balls were held in high fashion under the anxious scrutiny of the sponsoring mothers and grandmothers who watched nervously from their seats as the girls went about dancing the minute, flirting coquettishly from behind fluttering fans as the clergy and Caucasian gentry looked on their appraisal and speculation. Upon their request, girls would also dance and hold conversation with the male patrons in attendance. When some attending Caucasian male become in enamored and enchanted with the charm and potential of some Creole beauty of his choice, he then would formally approach the chaperoning mother and make arrangements to become a sponsor, patron, or protector of the last. This generally consisted of promises, financial support, lodgings, dress, and food, along with pledged responsibility to the offspring which might well come forth as a result of the communion. The mother would barter for the best agreement on her daughter's behalf, which frequently would include luxuries such as jewelry or a horse and a carriage. Creole mothers dealt shrewdly, for they mostly would also be dealing on behalf of their own personal existence and survival. Generally, when the agreement was reached, the mothers would move in with their daughters to supervise the household, prepare food, and nurse children who would most assuredly be born. Through generations, the beauty and the charm of these Creole women became legendary world over. Even the Spaniards continued the practice when Louisiana was ceded to Spain. Their presence on the streets of New Orleans and attendance in the second balcony at the opera would cause frequent conster- consternation and stir among the legal wives of their Caucasian patrons. So obvious became the displeasure and discomfort of the Caucasian wives of Louisiana that they prevailed upon the Honorable Governor Claiborne to enact a statute which stipulated all gens de couleur, when appearing in public, must wear tignons on their heads, for without such it had become impossible to distinguish the race or Negro ancestry of these Creole women. The customs and culture of the French and Spanish Catholics, along with the Creoles, Nigger Free Jacks, were zealously guarded upon the arrival of the American Protestants with their common jack nigger class of darkies, house and field darkies, after the Louisiana Purchase. They even ostracized them socially, which forced the Kaintuck Americans to build a sector of the city for themselves on the south side of the Big Canal. Thus, Canal Street became a divisionary line between the old city and the American sector, uptown, which is presently known as the New Orleans Garden District. Through enterprise, business, trade, and skill, the wealth of Creoles, Group 1 niggers, flourished. At the time of the Civil War, free jacks had amassed properties and wealth which totaled to more than $14 million amongst themselves. But alas, when the Civil War ended, the wealth of the South became depleted, along with the prominence and distinction of the Creoles, for now all jacks had become free. So many escaped to become white by crossing over the color line. The others, in confusion, formed themselves as a settlement called Creole Section, just back of town, which is called Back of Town, below the old city. Creating a society of their own, neither black nor white, they sought a spiritual and social escape from the distasteful category and classification as niggers. distorted to speaking in their own particular Creole language, a corrupt and illiterate patriots of combinations and contradictions of vulgar French, Dutch, German, English, and Spanish tongues in order to converse with and among each other. They called this speaking Creole. They shunned all social and spiritual contacts with the Protestant church and black American niggers from uptown who had also become freejacks as a result of Union victory in the Civil War. They prevailed upon the Catholic Church to establish parochial Creole schools that their children would not become contaminated with less Negroes. They supported their own Catholic churches, which discouraged the attendance of the dark-skinned Catholics their mother church obliged them. Although the quadrant balls had disappeared, along with Caucasian protectors, the Creoles maintained a season of socials, lavish balls, and debut parties, where fair-skinned octoroons, quadroons, and mulatto males attended the role of potential husbands. The prerequisites of attendance of these Creole socials for males here gotta be light, bright, and damn near white, with good hair growing on his head. Many of the mothers would encourage illicit sexual congress with white men for their fair daughters in order to keep the blood-strained whites impure. The Caucasian Creoles, niggers that successfully crossed over, made shambles of historical records in the Cedar Hall and in the Cabildo. They burned records and destroyed pages from the archives which might prove and establish the taint nigger blood strains. Louisiana emerged the only Confederate state where citizens might file suit in the courts of law to be declared as white or Caucasian. Its statute reads that one is a Negro who, wherever there exists a perceptible trace of Negro blood. How can Negro blood be perceptible except through external experiences, my son? Appearances, my son. So many of the Creole descendants did survive, my son, to attain the legal status of the Caucasian, while others remain as colored privileged Negro caste. Quadrant, octoroon, mulattoes, boasting their pride of pallor and features will indicate their pronounced blood relationship to the Caucasian conceivers of Christianity. These are our Group 1 niggers, who would believe that pale color affords them a distinctive status of class. Group 2 niggers, integrationists, or nigger progressives. These are the shady aspects of our people, shaded in spirit and thought as well as the physical colors of their pigments, which range from yellow, beige, brown to blue-black, but their physical colors determine as a rule the degree of self-hate harbored for their fate of being born as black kind. And because of this accident of fate and birth, they strive, clamor to grow, conform, and concede to become black models of Christianity, vying for recognition as a class among Caucasians, Negro. They would accept to be a class in the middle of modern humanity as Negro, implying growth and escape from the distasteful stigma of being black, the color which Christianity considers godless. These Group 2 niggers, my son, are the direct blood descendants of those savages, the tribal African chiefs who bartered the first black bodies of their men, women, and children into the bondage of slavery to obtain the graces and good favor for himself from the Christian missionaries and Caucasian traders whose pale skins he preferred to that of his own. This heritage was passed on and brought to this continent, perpetuated during the period of American slavery. Progressive blacks became the house niggers, based on conformity and adoration for the Caucasian master and his Christian godliness. The common-bred black men and women who would not so conform were beaten, sold, rejected, disposed, dispatched, or to destiny as field niggers. They arrived in the mother city both good and bad. Blacks chained together to be bought, sold, traded as chattels, to be sent as beasts of burden until death, into the fields of sugarcane, cotton, and tobacco. There on American plantations, black women were bred, and their offspring snatched from their breasts and bartered as commodities to enrich the coffers of the master. As slaves, the group two niggers produced the Protestant preachers who willingly, for the master's good favor, led his black followers into conformity and acceptance, docility and conduct for the convenience and pleasure of the master. Even more to gain the favor, the nigger preacher taught prayer and forgiveness for all the sins which the master had committed against him. He encouraged black women to submit their bodies to the master, that they might conceive children which he, the preacher, might baptize in the name of Christ. Thus my son, the Negro preacher, had become the white man's replacement for the tribal chiefs who originally sold us into slavery. And even during slavery, the Nigger Protestant preacher had come to the fore as leader among Group 2 Nigger progressives. When they heard the news ending the Civil War, Lee done surrendered to Grant. We free just like the white folks, and them pass for white niggers over there across town. So these Group 2 niggers reformed their progressive settlement directly back of town of the masters Americans of Garden District to become trash keepers, handymen, butlers, waiters, cookers, gardeners, liverymen, and maids. Mostly they tried seriously to seek professions in which they would not have to work with our hands. They became preachers, teachers, shopkeepers, peddlers, hairdressers, uniformed bank messengers, or delivery men of groceries, ice, wood, and coal. They opened ramshackle schools and church houses and prevailed upon city fathers to add one or two public schools for their children where they emphasized hymn singing, Bible uh, recitations by heart more than reading, writing, or arithmetic. They stressed discipline for their children with a severity of whipping such as they themselves had received during slavery at the hands of their white masters. Spare the rod, spoil the child. Whipping won't kill him fast as the white man will. If we don't take heed to goodness, the white folks did to me. They never hit me near, miss, or lick 'em wrong. Low humbleness and meekness were their words, to prove our worthiness before the white folks. The progressive, my son, did then as always and now consider themselves the uplifters among our people. They attempted to acquire the houses and homes alongside to become neighbors of the white folks. To prove we just as good as they are, they scorn their people for acting like a nigger. If we want white folks right, we gotta act like white, else we ain't gonna give 'em to you. Preachers would shout from their pulpits. Conduct yourselves like the white folks do. If you're gonna act black, get back. You're holding the rest of us down. The progressives strove to learn Latin, Greek, French, Spanish, for these subjects were not synonymous with being black nor suggestive of labor with their hands. Their community became the fertile ground for the inventions and sales of chemicals and concoctions, potions of hair and skin, applications, oils, creams, acids, grease, which with which they hope to hasten that day and time when we'll be just as light with hair just as good as the white folks. In the meantime, they compensated with mode, speech, and conduct for their inability to merge Caucasian. By physical appearance, they sought to emulate the speech and behavior to gain acceptance and approval of Mr. Charlie. While ostracized by the Group 1 Creoles because of the color of their skins, Group 2 Progressives formed themselves Negro society based on refinement, snobbery, profession, and instinct of formal education. The Negro society distinctively marked by manners, dress, party, home, simulating splendor of white society, but notable for white and conspicuous conception, living high on the hog, putting on the dog, spending way out, above their means of income. Negro society gave them prestige among themselves and before the Caucasians who observed them. They thrilled to partake in Caucasian Sunday church services, then allowed to obliged to occupy the rear pews assigned to them, dressed in their finest finery to impress the white folks. Some colored folks are ready, 'cause we have learned how to dress, talk, and conduct ourselves. When the Caucasian Christians began to reject such practices, Negro society, the progressives who were ready did not see nor interpret this as a form of Christian bigotry, but laid the fault on the common bred niggers of our race. These they damned for holding us back. The top rung of the ladder among Negro society was generally conceded to the doctor and members of his immediate family, with Negro pharmacists and his immediate relatives relegated to a close second place for a druggist who was addressed by the title of doctor. Then came Negro educators, college presidents, school principals, deans, male instructors, who were generally all addressed as professor shortened to Professor. Next in the social lineup was the female teacher, who had earned the right to publicly address as Miss or Mrs. Then came in line undertakers, embalmers, life insurance executives, and salesmen. After these, in the parade of social nigger prestige, would be the civil servants, government workers, clerks, mail clerks, carriers for city and state. These were followed by butlers, chauffeurs in which white homes, head waiters, white bellboys and bell captains, and prominent hostelries and Caucasian restaurants. Then railroad men, sleeping car porters, then railroad station porters, and red caps. The more the profession called for physical exertion, the less prominence and prestige in nigger society among Group 2 progressives of the race. Group 3, the common bred nigger outcast. Common bred outcast was the title bestowed upon this underprivileged group of our black kind, my son, by the light-skinned Creoles and the dark-skinned progressives. For these common bred outcasts were met with contempt and resentment among their own black kind, equal only by the former experience in slavery. These were our country field hands, black farmers and sharecroppers who fled from the cruel humanity of rural alabaster bigotry and ignorance immediately after the war between the states. The minute that freedom was declared, they came in droves and in numbers before ever learning the meaning or even the spelling the word freedom. They were received with annoyance by the alabaster peers and rejection from their niggerated city cousins, whom they had travelled forth to make communion with, that all niggers might work out destiny in togetherness. They came eager to learn, to work, give, to receive, in the cause and liberty for our black kind. Theirs were the black shoulders and muscles which we came to know as the forces of labor. Remember, these are the sturdiest of any people, my nigger son, and it is within the power of their collective souls and spirits that the hopes and aspirations of our niggers will survive or come to know futility and ultimate failure. They had fled the tyranny of rural transportations of cane fields, cotton, tobacco, seeking improvement and relief in the progress of city life is enjoyed by the seemingly more fortunate of their kinkind, but were met with hostility on both sides, revulsion on behalf of dudes, yellow, class white niggers from downtown of the mother city and them dark-colored, high-falutin uptown niggers. But the common bred outcasts remained in the city, for their will to survive is eternal. They became the bulk and the backbone of the vanishing profession which had come to know as common day labor. They dug the ditches for our sewers and outhouses. They laid the cross ties and the railway lines, erected the telephone and telegraph poles, and strung out the lines in between them. They were the road gangs that graded the highways. The city street sidewalks were traveled. They were the firemen who stoked the locomotive engine. They unloaded and reloaded the boxcars and transports. They were the stevedores who emptied and refilled the tugboats, freighters, and steamships that sailed and ferried to and from the seaports of the basins, canal, and the river wharves and the oceans. They were the barkeeps, the shopkeepers, janitors, washwomen, the cooks and handyman, and the gardeners, the extras, waiters, waitresses in the private white homes, hotels, and the colored cafes. They were our entertainers, dancers, singers, makers of songs, laughter, and frolic. These common-bred outcasts among niggers who also gave us the gospel, the jokes, and the ditties, jingles of poem, the nigger spiritual, the gut-bucket stomp, and the funk of the low-down blues song. They were the creators of black-face farce comedy, the minstrels, and the low-class nigger burlesque. And above all this they gave to this nation its only indigenous music art, from which we have come to know presently as jazz. And note, my son, the ironical fact that from these third group niggers the discarded amongst our Niggers have come the only vital contribution to the spiritual and cultural welfare of our existing young American nation. While unable to find social or even physical placement among their native black cousins of the city, these newly arrived families of the common-bred outcasts created their own settlements around the swamp edges of the city outskirts, built their lintos and shacks along the city dumps of wood boxes discarded and rusted in tin roofings and the lumber of dismantled shipping crates. Gradually they took over to rent for their dwellings the ghostly cast-offs, railroad boxcars which lined the yards of cities' abandoned railway sidings. They built waterfront shanties along the mouths of the basin and the riverfront levees. The more fortunate among them became the inheritors of the rotting condemned tenements of Storyville, of the Third Ward, the cesspool for the discards of humanity. Storyville, the most original and legendary, America's foremost and first of its many black nigger ghettos. Storyville came into being, my son, as all of our black nigger ghettos do, in man's questionable attempts to improve his lot by isolating himself from the stigmas that he himself imposed upon his fellow kind. It all started and came about in the year of 1879, when the mother city of our nation was basking in the heyday of funk, stick, corruption, death rows. Prostitution, social, moral, and physical, was considered the city's biggest problem, but most of the emphasis was on the physical prostitution, whoring, and had become the mode and fad among the daughters of our mother city. Prostitutes were so prominent that they had begun to rank by among the city's most respectable elements. Prostitutes would acquire the most valuable properties in and among the finest and most exclusive neighborhoods, then transfer such homes into whorehouses, much to the alarm of our Christian protectors of morality, who stood idly by while it flourished, until it finally came to impose upon their own private comforts. It was then, in the year mentioned, that an ambitious politician and elected city alderman, whose name was Sidney Story, came forth with an ordinance which the fathers adopted, intended to curb the spread of prostitution. In essence, the ordinance read thusly: "It is hereby unlawful for any woman notoriously abandoned to lewdness or prostitution to occupy, inhabit, sleep in any house, room, closet, or corner located without the following streets," etc. It went on to name the boundary stipulated streets where prostitution would not be legally tolerated, but it mentioned nothing as to what was not to transpire legally within the streets of the sector. The ordinance was taken at its words, or lack of words. Thus came America's foremost of, if not first, legalized red light district, which the natives who lived there named Storyville. in order of the aldermen who had made its existence possible. The decent elements of the city, white and black, fled that sector of the city, signaling the takeover and occupancy by the common-bred niggers who moved right in alongside the depraved white trash who elected to remain there. Storyville grew to reach its peak around 1911, but in 1918, during World War I, it showed very few signs of being on the decline, for it boasted more than 18,000 working prostitutes, all jam-packed into a confined area, little more or less than 10 square city blocks. At least three-fourths of its whores were black women. The area included part of the city's industrial section, the Bassin Canal, the riverfront, the old French sector, and the Chinatown, with its temples, restaurants, shops, fronts, laundries, its gamblers, hatchet men, and dens for the seekers of opium. Inside the area were also pits for dog, bear, and cockfights, gambling dens, lottery wheels, dope trafficking houses, rooms and stalls for whoring. Bassin Street was the most noted for all its thoroughfares where all the dark and light folks met, and the fun of music, dance, despoiling, and death. Rampart Street was next in note, standing north to south, bisecting the famous Canal Street, which served as the city's principal avenue, dividing the uptown sector from the dogtown sector. My nigger son, you will rarely or never hear mention of the names of our nigger kin who made Storyville live, except perhaps in the legends and the songs which were faithfully disappearing as we make our racial bid to integrate and vanish into the futility of Caucasian existence. No historical records were kept for Storyville's nigger black outcasts. Few of them, if any, had acquired sufficient school education, along with the luxury of time to write and keep records of their doings and their deeds and the names of those who performed them. The two elevated groups of our nigger children, Group 1 and Group 2, felt it is shameful to even acknowledge their existence, so it is here that we have lost the most vital part of our history. Even the distinctive music of Storyville, along with the outcast nigger musicians who developed it, were ignored as artistry and artists by the two elevated groups amongst us until the Caucasian turned to acclaiming and acknowledging them. Negroes even clamored to be rid of the memory of Storyville's black personalities, whose lives, living and dying, had made such music possible. But Bad Man Stuckley, Sweet Billy Lion, Funky Bud Lou, Black Manny, Sweet Black Albertine, the two famous groupers, Liver Tongue Lewis and Blue Tonsils Moore, Rope Tick Shirley, Greasy Dick Green, Dirty Dog Daniels, Fat Mama Lucy, Skinny Butt Slim, Joe the Grinder, Dirty Deal Fats, Freckle Face Van, Bull Dyke and Black Mildred, Frog the Pimp, Frog the Pimp, Sugar Man, Whitfield, Baby Doll Esther, Sweetie Pie Brown, and others among them whose very struggles for survival and existence gave to the blues not only its actual meanings but served to make it meaningful to the musical geniuses who created it. Then, my son, there was among Storyville's notorious the Queen, the greatest of them all, Lulu White or Mahogany Hall, whose life living served as an inspiration of Storyville's women, just as her Caucasian counterparts, Madame du Barry and Marie Antoinette, must have served their own, for Lulu White is, without dispute, probably the most fabulous of all American courtesans, black or white, and anywhere else in between. Why, except for her racial origin, along with the snobbery of Negro historians, Lulu White might have taken and held her place in history as not only one of the most prominent procurers of this nation, but as one of the most influential women in America. During her reign, her whorehouse alone, Mahogany Hall, with its lavish furnishings and trappings, carried an assessed value of more than $100,000. The assessment was made in the year of 1911, when the price for the skilled labor was but $2 a day and less. Lulu White once issued a public letter to any woman in the city, white or black, rich or poor, married woman or whore, to match her private personal collection and jewels. None, it is well to add, came forth to honor her challenge. Lulu White and her lavish showplace Mahogany Hall were both listed number one in the Blue Book, a printed publication containing names, addresses, even pictures of the city's most prominent whorehouses, which would be purchased at newsstands for 25 cents a copy. The names of the mammals were printed in capital letters while names of the hostesses were listed in small print. Louis Satchmo Armstrong, who used to once entertain at Mahogany Hall, was a song included in his music repertoire, which is titled Mahogany Hall Stomp. As to the power and influence of this woman, my son, Lulu White holds the enviable distinction of becoming the only woman in American history to ever be pardoned from federal penitentiary by a president of the United States. She was convicted and sentenced to our federal institution at Atlanta under the federal prohibition law for selling beer to a soldier. This was a signal event that marked the unusual end of Storyville, an ending just as unique and unusual as its beginning. When the war was declared upon Germany's Kaiser Wilhelm, New Orleans at that time was considered second port United States, with New York City as the first. There was grave concern in our nation's capital at Washington, D.C. for the health and welfare of our troops who were to embark at the port of New Orleans because of Storyville. Attempts were made to prevail upon the mayor and city fathers to call an end to the activities in Storyville as a special concession to the war effort. When such a proposal was rejected, then the U.S. Secretary of War elected to place New Orleans under military rule for the duration of the war. It was then officially declared that Storyville would be no more. Someone even helped the process by setting fire to some of its existing buildings. Many of the natives fled. But Madame Lulu White remained in defiance of the law, just as she had witnessed so many of her prominent Christian patrons defying the natural laws of God and love at Mahogany Hall, and rewarded her for the privilege of doing so. So Lulu was convicted and got time for a short stretch of in Atlanta, where she went on to make history at the cost ranging somewhere between $25,000 and $50,000, and a direct response from Woodrow Wilson, our idealistic president who took time out from his business at the Paris Peace Conference while forming the League of Nations to sign a presidential pardon for a Nigger woman prostitute, thus vindicating her role in the pages of our negligent history. As a rule, my son, the highest aspirations for our youngest Niggerine daughters who chanced to be born among Storyville's common-bred outcasts was to grow up with the hope and prayer of one day living and working out of Mahogany Hall and getting to something like Lulu White and her girls. But few of them ever made that high and that far. Mostly they lived to watch their dreams wither away, along with their bodies, and amid fumes of stink and stench of diseases, the foul smells which rose from the stagnant slop and slimy green filth of the street gutters, replenished daily from emptied piss pots and slop jars filled to the brims from the night before. Their lives and dreams would be smothered in these odors as the hot summer midday sun bore down its heat upon those fetid gutters, boiling the contents that they bubbled, causing a sickening savor to rise and fill the air and mingle with the odors of stale body sweat, homebrew, gin, and cheap Chinese incense that burned within the houses and cubicles, escaping from the windows to blend with the sickening sweet odor of dried cologne, intermingled with the sugar-heavy perfumes of natural honey, suckle blossoms from the vines which grew to climb the rotting green plank facade of each dwelling. But it was the nights that gave them hope, for they were children of darkness and the night. By night they lived these nigger outcasts when they received visitation from the horny males, the Christian and Jew, black and white, the lustful males of Group 1 as well as Group 2 niggers, father and son alike, following the patterns as set by their Caucasian peers, who awaited the darkness to prowl and plunder, searching for their salvation and their sanity through sexual rites and depravity among the very human discards whom by daylight they lived to despise. At night, mist and noxious odors came from within, floating from doors and windows, sometimes laughter and music, the thumping of a piano, the plunking of a guitar, a mandolin or a banjo, and often a drum beat or tambourine refrain, stomping feet of dancers, sometimes sad hymn, a mournful blues, or a wail, the prayerful peal or squeal of human misery and pain, along with occasional cry of joy and delight, riding the crest of staccato of profanity, curses, and heavenly pleas, screamed out and shouted from the suffering throats and mouths of the neighborhood inhabitants. These were the sounds of Storyville, and our black people in darkness will later be put to music. The degradations, misery, and exaltations created particular sounds which were to be captured, contained, and released in song by the nigger black American heroes and historians, the fathers of jazz and the blues, with such names as Kid Ory, Sidney Bechet, King Oliver, Barney Biggert, Papa Celestin, Joe Robichaux, Fats Pichon, Fats Pyron, Louis Armstrong, and others whom the concoctors of formal history have ever, have ever forgotten or never researched far enough back to learn of them.